Hi, and welcome to Spirit Paranormal. My name is Chief Lawson. I'm the founder of Spirit, and today we're going to talk about a couple of different things. This video is being shot on December 31st, 2020. As we all know, 2020 has been a very, very rough year, to say the least. The spring, as everyone knows, the COVID-19 pandemic hit the United States, causing egregious amounts of death. And this had been the first time in a long time that a major pandemic had affected the United States. And so, as a result, we were greatly impacted, unfortunately. Many lives were lost. And we're still not over it yet. December of 2020 finds us with at least a light at the end of the tunnel. The vaccination is on the way. It's been developed. 2 large corporations, and now a third is producing it. It's in the process of being distributed, starting with the first responders on out. It is going to get to us for those who want it, and we're starting to see the end of this. Although, and we'll talk about this at the end of the video, because this is really not technically paranormal, but it does relate to all of our lives and the fact that the world has changed again. It's every so often there's a large event on a magnitude scale that changes the way we see life and the way we live in the United States and in the world. So, oddly enough, when I'm out with my friends, everyone refers to me as the ghost guy. So, I and my wife were recently watching a TV series, and there was 2 characters in it. One was an FBI agent, the other was an ATF agent. The arrogant FBI agent kept referring to the ATF agent as the bomb guy. Well, so when I'm around with other people, I am the ghost guy. So when questions involving parapsychology, paranormal items come up, of course I'm always the one that they come to ask. It's kind of like sitting with a bunch of friends and watching a horror movie where they ask you, if you can ghosts really do that? So, anyway, we were talking about how ghosts are made and whatnot. The subject came up as to whether or not the pandemic would cause us to have ghosts as a result of the deaths of the pandemic. Certainly, the pandemic, more than likely, will produce some haunted locations and some hauntings. Okay? And we have to look at this in a pandemic view. First of all, as long as there's been life on Earth, there's been pandemics and plagues that take that life away. So, this is something that's not necessarily new. It causes eruptions of hysteria, people who are really concerned, and it sparks the buying, as we've seen with COVID-19, the buying of toilet paper. I'm sure somewhere there's a guy out there that has an entire garage with like 7,000 rolls in it. People go a little nuts and they start fearing everything, and they run out and they start stocking. Certainly, I think everyone needs to be prepared and needs to keep supplies, and of course this has certainly helped us all remember that fact. I was alive during the 1978 blizzard. And I remember after that, it had a great impact on everyone. My dad went out and created shelves in a utility room that we had to start storing canned food, fried powdered products, everything in the world. From that day forward, we always had at least a month's worth of supplies. Bear in mind, we were only in the house 48 hours to 72, but still, it was a lasting impact for those around us. So, understand that pandemics, and certainly that doesn't cause the ghost, as we know. It's certainly the deaths of a lot of people who have unfinished business in life that sometimes will keep them here. Point in case, as I've said, there's been many pandemics, but one of the more memorable ones that have some very recorded hauntings is the 1918 Spanish flu. The Spanish flu, a lot of people today were not alive when that happened, and those that are remember it, and for them there may have been a lot of similarities here. The first signs of it appeared in Spain, henceforth the name Spanish flu. In America alone, it was reported that 675,000 people died from the disease by summer of 1919. So in 1 year's period of time, that was a staggering number, and still is. And when we look at COVID, it's not much different. The disease spread so fast that many schools, churches, private homes, theaters, etc., were all impacted. Theaters were shut down. Hospitals were overloaded to the point that they had to have makeshift hospitals set up in theaters and high school gymnasiums. A lot of your standard utilities collapsed. They were unable to continue because they didn't have the people. And we're seeing that today. You know, when we were locked down for a period of time and the production's coming back now, we're still short enough people to do full productions of certain products we're wanting. You know, I've been to the grocery store for a particular product that I look for the last 3 months, and they haven't had it. And why? Probably because the production company is short people to be able to make it. So a lot of things happened then that are happening now. Garbage unfortunately went uncollected back then, which hasn't been the problem that I'm aware of so far. Mail certainly was impacted, and the funeral services were impacted. People were dying at a heavy rate, and they couldn't keep up. Matter of fact, in 1918, they ran out of caskets for the amount of bodies that they had as a result. So when we look at this, you know, there's a lot of similarities. The libraries were one of the big things that were impacted back then. That was a large social outlet, so to speak, and they had to quit lending books because the books, there was a good chance that, you know, they could spread the disease. The public officials came out and did about the same thing that you see here with COVID-19. They barred people from going out, asked them to stay inside, and then mandated that they had to stay inside. They were mandated to wear masks. You've seen a lot of folks making masks, just like you see nowadays. They were making them out of any material they could find, and they were using those to cover their face to prevent the disease. It was quickly determined that sneezes and coughs, as airborne, it was going to be transmitted in particulates that way, and that the mask would help cut down on transmission. Movie theaters closed. A lot of stores closed. There was not going to be allowed anyone in them. A lot of the general stores, grocery stores at that point in the Spanish flu would have someone come to the door, give them an order, they would fill it, hand it back out, let them pay for it. It was very rough. Hand washing was insisted upon. They felt this was the best way to battle this, and soap became a problem, much like some of the supplies we had today, the disinfectants and so forth that ran out early on. So immediately it was a problem. The Spanish flu hit in 3 waves. Okay, so the first wave came in the spring of 1918. Okay, and it even ran through Europe. Then it was reported that 18 cases of the influenza occurred at Fort Riley Army Base in Kansas at that period. The second wave struck lethally in the fall of 1918. In Boston was one of the heavy hit areas, kind of the epicenter of the second wave. His most deadly month was October, when it was reported 195,000 Americans died. Deaths occurred as far as California, North Dakota, Florida, Texas, even some of the remote islands off the Keys and in the Pacific. And this happened within hours or days of the symptoms. It was very fast. Theories formulated that the virus had mutated. The third and last wave appeared in the spring of 1919. The flu spread unevenly throughout America, parts of Europe, and other areas of Asia. However, losses totaled to nearly 675,000 Americans alone. Worldwide, there was a reported 20 million lives that were lost. The plague left children orphaned and destroyed many families. As a result of that, to this day, we have a few places that are haunted or believed to be haunted by those victims of the 1918 Spanish flu. I'll give you some suggestions, okay, just some examples here. St. Augustine Spanish Hospital, St. Augustine, Florida, okay. The Dry Tortugas of Key West, Rolling Hills Asylum in New York, Greenville, TB Hospital, Johnson Hospital, Biltmore Hotel in Miami. Some of the hospitals and almost every old hospital that had been closed down in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, had these Alcatraz, several. The time San Quentin wasn't around, but Leavenworth was. They both had severe outbreaks. By the way, I want to thank the website Old City Ghosts, as we got some of this information of the sites from there. These were locations to this day, they're still haunted, or believed haunted, by victims of the 1918 plague. Now, so obviously the plague, and there's some other plagues that has created hauntings. I'm just using that because of the similarities between COVID-19. So, will there be COVID-19 ghosts? I'm sure there will. I'm sure there'll be some locations or areas that we will have hauntings when this is over with. 20 years from now, we'll be talking. I hope to be alive and be able to talk and tell about haunted locations that happened as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. I do believe they'll be there. As we know, a lot of times entities are created as a result of sudden death or death without fulfilling one's life task and having a longing to complete those items. So that very well may be. One thing I do want to say is, as 2021 comes in, 2020 changed the face of the nation, okay, with the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is not the first time this has happened. As I said, when I was young, I went through the 1978 blizzard. I remember my father, the big change that went through him building the shelves. Okay, another one was the 9/11 attacks. I remember being a firefighter, we were put on standby to deploy, and I remember everybody came out. The world changed. People volunteered. I remember people volunteered to drive us, to do anything they could to help us, to help them. I remember there was flags everywhere. Every house had a flag. Everybody wore 9/11 pins, black ribbons. All of our badges were draped in black. The engines, everybody, that was one of the things that I think put a lot of American flags on fire engines, was 9/11. It also brought to the reality of those of us first responders of the mortality of one's own life in any's profession. But I remember things changed. Of course, a lot of people, the easy stuff changed with the airport, flying, having to go through security, having your birth certificate checked and everything else, to get on the plane. I remember flying immediately after 9/11 and how many searches I had to go through before I get on the airplane. But it changed the nation. To this day, as a kid, I can remember being in Cub Scouts and going on observation decks and watching, aircraft take off. I remember going through touring aircraft. That's not allowed anymore. It's a security risk because too much of a chance someone could shoot off a rocket from an observation deck. I mean, that's why airports don't have them any longer. Or that, we could sneak something on a plane, so they don't allow that anymore. It changed the face. COVID-19 will change how we realize the future and how we go forward. And I think a lot of that, if we quote Norman Peale, I would say a lot of it's positive attitude, and knowing that we have to go forward with a positive attitude. The one thing that I will say on this New Year's Eve is that as we go into 2020, be patient, be kind, and most of all, be careful. The end is coming. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. This pandemic will be over soon, and or at least controlled. And life as we know it will change. We may find ourselves having to wear a mask more often. We may find ourselves having a lot of issues that this has changed. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that weren't, so to speak, preppers that stocked ahead that now have stock. I'm sure there's quite a few people out there that have a wonderful supply of toilet paper. But either way, as we go into this next year, I urge everyone to be patient and be calm. It is, the end is coming to the end, and we will get back to some form of normalcy. And somewhere down the road, don't be surprised when you see this building is haunted by the victims of the COVID pandemic who died here, because I do believe that will happen. Parapsychology has shown us that in documented cases. I do believe it'll be here. So on behalf of Spirit and our staff, I'd like to wish you a happy new year and a very happy, healthy, and prosperous 2020.